Bye bye, Boogieman.
Welcome to episode 3, Bye Bye Boogeyman, here with Darrin Person. Yes, I'm back again, and if you're watching, you'll notice that I do have a guest in the house today, and she is my beautiful wife, Iris Person. How you doing today, Iris?
I'm doing great and just really honored to be here with you all today. Hello, everybody. Excited for the podcast today.
Well, obviously, I'm really excited. This is the first time I had a guest live in studio, if you will. And I told Iris, usually I don't charge for anybody to be part of the podcast, but on this, I will make an exemption. And Iris is only giving me like a kiss on the cheek afterwards. Is that a deal?
I think I could work that out.
All right. We're already winning. Well, today's episode is why so much anxiety. Obviously, if you've been watching or listening, you know that we have been walking this road of talking about anxiety, talking about fear in relation to the book I wrote, Bye Bye Boogeyman. And we've been covering a lot of content. And I thought today would be relevant for us to dive in. So if you're watching, I think you will love this moment as we talk about anxiety, but also talk about fear and anxiousness. Iris is a clinical therapist. So when I scan the world, thinking about who I have somebody in my house has her own practice. And I wanted her just to come and just enlighten you to talk about it. And many of you don't know, but anxiety is, in terms of mental health disorders, it's number one across the board. Many of you that might be listening have either dealt with it yourself or you know a person. And if that's the case, I encourage them to listen in today because I think it'll be helpful. And even if you haven't had anxiety itself, there's so many people in our world that are dealing with it. And I think it'd be great to just be part of this conversation on today. So thank you for listening in. I don't want to really waste any time, Iris. So I'm glad that you're here. But, first, I don't know if everybody knows you. So won't you tell a little bit about yourself?
Well, you mentioned that I'm a clinical therapist in private practice, but I've also done social work in many different areas of social work. I've been a school social worker. I've been a CPS social worker practitioner. I've worked with people with disabilities and mental and physical disabilities. I've worked with prisoners and inmates. I mean, you name it. So I just had a wonderful array of experiences in social work, which eventually led me into the clinical therapy that I'm doing today, which I love, helping children and families and individuals and groups, to maximize and self-actualize in their own lives. So.
You talked about helping, and many of you might be interested in helping profession. Many don't know our story, but I met Iris when I was 17 or 18, something like that. She was 15. Don't judge. All right. I was a senior and she was a freshman in high school, and we met and became good friends. But obviously, as that relationship progressed, I can remember the day, Iris, as you talk about helping people. Me and her, we used to go to area East Bakersfield High School and eat taco salad. We said one day we would write a book about taco salad. And while we were sitting here one day, maybe this was my way of trying to propose to you, Iris, but I said, one day we should build a counseling center, and we should call that counseling center Person to Person. And obviously my last name was Person, so I had a tent to hope that she would be a person as well one day. And that obviously we've been blessed to make that happen. Mm-hmm. But Iris, you talked about helping people. Why did you decide to get into the helping profession?
Well, I guess I was always that kid, or that person that people wanted to talk to. And I was always giving out advice. And I say in my first office was the high school bathroom stall. It was certainly not
counseling happening there.
Good counseling happened in the bathroom stall. So I was always that kid and that person that people seem to want to talk to. So I always wanted to help people and knew that I would do that one day. But I think even on a more serious note, when I think about my own childhood and my own family dysfunction and various childhood traumatic experiences, um, you know, I have to preface this by, saying, I'm really thankful to God, for the healing and the recovery that He's done in my family in many ways, and what He continues to do. But I really had a duplicitous experience as a child, and I felt that it was important to share this today on the podcast, that oftentimes people experience forms of love in their family, and then you also can experience various types of abuse. I grew up with domestic violence, substance and alcohol addictions, poverty and homelessness at times. So it was really, a very traumatic experience in many ways in Compton, California, growing up in the hood, so that came with its own set of stressors. But as a result of that, the impact upon me was really great. I really suffered with chronic depression and anxiety, and even to the point where I became suicidal. I wasn't able to complete that. Thankfully, I'm here. Always grateful to God for that. But it certainly did impact my life, and that seemed to linger and follow me. So I have to say that the outgrowth of that was my passion, to help other individuals and families to live more healthy lives. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, with all of my heart,
Yeah, and I was going to say you're doing it well, but I think and when I hear you talk about your own journey, I mean, we a lot of times end up doing things in life because we went through something.
Yeah.
And even those that are listening or whatever you might be, we don't go through things maybe, maybe it sounds cliche to say by accident, but if you do go through something, God can make and turn that into something.
Yes.
And now you see yourself. Did you ever help others? Did you ever think you would be a counselor? I never asked you that before.
I don't think I ever saw myself as the counselor that I am today, but definitely in some form of helping people. So I guess you could say I did, but I could never imagine that God could take someone like me and, make me into the person that I am today, really helping people with a private practice. So,
Well, here you go. You know me. I was talking, she knows I'll go off script, but here we go off script. Do you find yourself in the midst of helping others, somehow healing or helping yourself?
Oh, wow. That's an excellent question. And I say that every day. I'm in the best seat in the house. I have the best seat in the house. I get to, work with other people, but what they don't know is, yes, I'm healing every day. And every time I'm teaching or training or sharing things with them, I find that it keeps me accountable and it keeps raising the bar in my own life, so it definitely challenges me every day to be my best person and to, take the same advice that I'm giving to people. So thank you for that question. That's really powerful.
And oftentimes people say you got to be healed up before you can help somebody else. And maybe, individuals, we won't get into anxiety in a second, but you got to be healed up. Do you necessarily got to be healed up to help another person? What do you think?
Wow. Yeah, another good question. And this goes to something that we learn as we train as social workers and as therapists. It does talk about a level of, transparency that you need to have with yourself in order to have a self-understanding about, what you have been through and what you are healing from. And you definitely need to be active in getting that help. So that is something I feel like I've done in my life, and to a degree. And just like we have levels and degrees of things in life where we may be able to help someone else, but then we are also reaching and growing all the time. So I don't think that means that you stop growing and accomplishing your own healing. You will always be healing, and on a continuum of that, I would say. But I think that you can get to a point where you can help others.
And that's wonderful because this is the New Year season. Happy 2022. Me and Iris have been married 25 years.
Yes.
And I remember spending so many years when New Year's resolution. I once didn't believe in New Year resolutions, and I'm not saying I do, But I do think it's an opportunity when you enter the new year, you always think about some things you want to change.
Yeah.
And a lot of people want to change things, and they think about habits or that they want to get rid of, and they think about relationships they want to start, or they think about like, they want to start getting healthy. We all have these habits, and to be able to, move further within that resolution, we have to change something. Is change possible?
Yeah.
And what are some keys to change before we dive into anxiety and start talking about that?
Yeah. To do what I do, you have to believe that change is possible. I start with my own testimony of what God has done in me and the change that He's done in me, and therefore I believe, that He's capable of doing that in the lives of anyone that really desires a change. So I definitely, genuinely believe that most people want to change, but I find that not everybody has the knowledge or the skills, to make those changes. And so we often start out with a desire, but we have no works. As the Bible says, faith without works is dead, So I often find that, people just don't, apply the works that you need in order to do that. And so the scripture says that you have to be renewed, be ye transformed by the renewing of your minds. And so I think that that's a key part to the transformation. You also have to renew your mind.
Yeah, well, when I hear you say that, I'm happy. I'm happy that people can change. I'm happy that I can change. You don't want to never be in a situation where as you listen in today, maybe there's been a period that you're in a rut and you think, I've been suffering this for a long time and I want to get better. I've been going through year after year and I want to get better. These are some things that I want to. And to hear you say, as you treat people, not only you've seen it, but you believe in it. And we can all be encouraged no matter how bad a situation is and what we've been through. Change is possible. Yes. And one of those things that sometimes we go through, is mental health. We hear the term a lot more now. There's been some people that's been courageous enough to say things about it, and I'm glad, but it's nothing that's new. Yeah. And one of the biggest, and there's obviously stigma connected to it. I wrote in the book that people rather I got this kind of issue, but nobody want to say that I have a mental health issue. But all that says is that I'm struggling with something mentally and I need help, just like we struggle with physical things. Yeah. And what we see right now in the world is this struggle now with anxiety. Number one in mental health. Many of you that are listening here have dealt with it or have dealt with anxiety attacks, or this constant fear. And that's why I wrote Bye Bye Boogieman, because I was tired of, the fear in my life and then the fear that I saw in others. But a lot of people think, they're alone. But this is if any epidemic that we might have, we have this anxiety epidemic that people hide in the closet. They're afraid to talk about it. They've been living life for years and maybe things haven't changed. And so this is part of when you talk about transparent, I want to be transparent in these podcasts and just be open to discuss it and not hide. What would you say, as you practice, what percentage of individuals that you help deal with anxiety?
Yeah, it's striking, but true. 90, I would say at least 90%, if not more, present with some symptoms of anxiety along with other disorders that they might be struggling with or problems. And so, I think you were appropriate in using that word epidemic. It's sort of like a virus because you talk to so many people that are struggling with some form of anxiety. So it truly is.
And people they feel that they are alone in this. And when I hear you talk about it, they are not alone. So, in some people, I don't know. This is a question I don't think we really even talked about. So this conversation is really easy, everybody, because we sit here and we talk all the time about that because that's who we are. What are signs that a person is dealing with anxiety? As people hear, what are some signs when this is something that not only you're dealing with, but it's a problem?
Yeah, that's a, kind of a varying question because my youngest client has been 2 years old. My oldest clients have been in their 80s, and it crosses all backgrounds, socioeconomic, race, ethnicity, gender. It just doesn't discriminate. And you can see different symptoms anywhere from physiological things that you can tell that people have anxiety. I've had people that visibly are fidgeting and shaking, can't relax. They complain of headaches. You mentioned panic attacks earlier, and if you've ever had one of those, it feels like you're having a heart attack and you're going to pass out. Just a range of physiological symptoms, with that. But then it can also present with internal kind of thoughts and stress that you can't necessarily see, but a person is being tormented. They tell me I can't sleep at night. I'm worrying all the time. I'm so nervous, all the time, thinking the worst is going to happen. This doom's kind of thinking, fear of dying. A lot of people struggle with that. Having meltdowns or what we call nervous breakdowns. We're seeing more of that. Again, the thoughts are racing, maybe irritability. Sometimes we don't realize when we see a lot of anger outburst or people on edge and, just feeling unstable and unsteady. Those could be signs that someone is really struggling with anxiety.
I think, and how does it look like? You talked about irritability and anger and stuff. Like if I'm in a relationship or I'm at my job, right? And does it look differently, or how will it show up like that?
Yeah, that's good, because the way that it manifests sometimes is definitely in all of those areas. You can see it in the home, you can see it on the job, you can see it whether you're at school or socializing in relationships. And again, people might be very conflictual, or they're having a lot of conflict with people. They are, often having a lot of trust issues, a lot of issues, people pleasing, and maybe showing up in that way, fear of rejection, fear they're going to be abandoned. It can come out in fear of performance, like, am I going to get these deadlines done? Am I going to do a good job with that? Will I be judged? Will I be criticized? And just, I think, worrying about a lot of things, you can constantly see that, and it can be projected on you to the point where it affects you when you are dealing with someone who has anxiety. So
you said worrying about, someone, and and I wrote that book because I thought about just constant worry. And I don't know, you all, as you listen in, like if you've ever lived just constant worrying about what's going to happen, worrying about death, worrying about tomorrow. And to me, that's like no way to live. And obviously God doesn't want us to live in that. And that's why he reminds us so many times in the scripture about, don't worry about it. I take care of everything, including the plants and the bees and everything else, because he knows there's something about us that tend to worry. It's mentioned over and over in scripture. Don't worry, don't be afraid, over and over again. So there's a reason, because there's a tendency for us to do that. And I mean, you know my story, and it's interesting. Like I have her here because a lot of people talk about anxiety in terms of a weakness. We all go through something. We all have our moments of weakness. And I remember I was talked about like feeling a heart attack, and I was very, what we try to do in this podcast is to be like very honest. And I just remember she gets on me all the time, everybody, because I like to hide sweets up in the closets. But one day I had a run in with some beef. I'm serious. I ate that beef in the morning, in the noonday, and in the evening. And that evening, I ended up driving in the car with Iris, and I thought I was having a heart attack. And being the man that I am, I told her I can drive myself, even with my heart attack, into the emergency room. And I thought that was like, I'm having a heart attack. And what was discovered was I was not. And what interested me is when I got to my own doctor, he asked me, he said, Darrin, are you dealing with anxiety? I looked at him like he was crazy, because here I am. I help people. I minister to people. And I was like, man, are you kidding me? I didn't say that to him, but I said, No, I don't have no anxiety issue.
Mhm.
In that moment, I was like, I think I had a panic attack. And the first thing I thought about in terms of weakness was more of embarrassed that I would have to go through
Mhm.
something like that. And Iris, even, and it was actually in this studio that we were in today where she had a conversation and she noticed that I had some type of anxiousness on me and approached me and prayed for me. And obviously a journey to be able to help me out, because what I learned is the reason why I was dealing with that is because I cared, not because I was afraid. I was caring because I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Therefore, I was going to be there for my family. So when you hear a person talk about it like as a weakness, what would you tell individuals, as they run into any type of mental health issue?
Mhm.
Because we are oftentimes embarrassed
Yeah,
that we are dealing with things. A lot of people never mention it, but they do, right?
yeah.
But we don't care. We want to talk about it. What would you tell a person that would say it's a weakness?
Yeah, that's something I encounter really quite often, no matter who I'm talking to, and especially Christians,
Mm,
because we feel like we're Christians, we should be strong and we have God and all of this. So I think I hear this a lot in my practice, and one of the things that I try to do is I also try to be vulnerable and to reduce that
mm,
stigma of it being a weakness, or I will try to be vulnerable. Like I started out with that great question that you asked me about my own life. I will share that appropriately, disclose to them that I also know what that is like, and that I'm not. Sometimes people think you've got it all together and you could never understand what that's like. So I think showing that level of empathy and honesty, first of all, and letting them know that it's okay, even a person like me or you has gone through that. And when reading your book, that was also a blessing to me to be vulnerable. You talk about that in the book. Um, One of the things I like to say to people is, uh, stop asking what's wrong with me as if you are
mm,
weak.
yeah.
But I
Mm,
say, ask what happened to me. So a lot of times something has happened to a person that has brought them to these anxiety feelings and symptoms, and it's attached to something. And I will ask them to get to the root of that. So stop asking what's wrong with me and say, what has happened to me? And how do I address the root of that? That doesn't make me weak. One of the things I heard somebody also phrase it as, what's strong with me? You are strong and you are
yeah.
courageous for noticing this and
Mm,
wanting to get help. And even you that have written a book about this and then sharing your story on here, people see you. You are such a strong figure in a community, and to the people that read your book, so that is proof, you and I sitting here today and how God has been able to use us and work through us. So there's nothing wrong with you, and you are not weak. You're actually strong, you're courageous, and this happens to the best of people.
You're strong and courageous. When you look at
Mhm.
people throughout history, even the great folk,
Mhm.
when they disclose is that they had something that they
Yeah,
were, they had a weakness or a thorn or
yeah,
something that,
yeah,
pressed them.
yeah.
And so I love when you say that, that strong and courageous. And if,
Mhm.
but what frightens, I wouldn't say frightens me is that, I even talk about this is that, we don't want fear or anxiety to take up residence,
Yeah.
meaning that, some of us have been dealing with this so long.
Mhm.
And that's why some people just get tired of things and they said, I'm just tired of it.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid, like, are there moments like if you don't do something about this anxiety,
Mhm.
that it could take up a root? Is
Mhm.
there an issue with something being there so prolonged? Because I want to just
Mhm.
really pound that, this is urgent and that we
Yes.
shouldn't walk with different things or mental health, or I'm going to wait to get help when I'm going to go to the
Right.
therapist,
Right.
when I'm going to stop doing this, but
Yeah.
is it important for us to like do something about it now?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. This is so important that we focus on this, because just like a person gets an infection and we look at
Mm,
the
mm,
pathology of medicine, we know how important it is to get some antibiotics or to get some medicine or to get some treatment on that. And if you were in the hospital, people would come and bring you cards and treat you with such love and care and push you, to get your help. But we treat our mental health differently, and it's something that maybe you can't see it like a physical illness. But it is something that if you don't take care of it, it can get worse and worse. And it's just like a cancer or an infection. It will just, it can lead you into deeper, mental health issues. And I've seen that when I'm working with younger people, for example, and they are dealing with their issues ahead, now while they're kids. I see them grow up into healthy teenagers, healthy adults. And some of them come back in 10 years and say, Mrs. Person, look at, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm doing. I deal with adults who, didn't get help, and they're in their 40s, their 60s, their 80s, and it has gotten so much worse. It has ruined their life. It has ruined their opportunities and hindered them and held them back, But I do want to say, some people do end up getting that help, and then they'll call me back and say, hey, I'm a counselor now, I'm a therapist, and that's like the greatest, testimony ever after you have been working with someone to see them recover. So it is so important that, you don't ignore this and you get help and you can live a quality life,
That's encouraging. I think we all want to know, can we live a quality life? And the answer is yes, we can.
Yes.
That no matter what we deal with, that and some of these things feel like, if you've ever been through any type of mental illness, like you feel hopeless. That's why some people like this. But I want to encourage everybody, there is hope. Even past some of these things that we're talking about today. And as I talk about anxiety, you talk about don't let it reside. Like, so if I'm dealing with it, what things should I do? What steps should I start taking like now? Like, what would you encourage somebody like that are listening and saying, hey, you're speaking to me? And I know that's going to be the case. People say that a lot. Hey, you're speaking to me. What would you tell them to do?
Yes, you keep hearing us talk about, the importance of transparency and honesty. I don't think you can, change something that we're not willing to acknowledge. We first have to be willing to say and confess. The Bible says we need to confess our faults one to another that we may be healed, and so if we're going through something, we're struggling with it, we need to first be able to acknowledge that and say, this is a problem, I'm struggling. And then the next thing is to take ownership, to take ownership. A lot of times we don't take ownership of things. I would tell people, it's not your fault what you went through and why you are struggling with anxiety, but it is your responsibility to take care of yourself, to take care of your life, to start working on that. So you really have to take responsibility for that. A lot of people will spend a lot of their life. I would say your life is this long, you can't see my arm stretched out, but something will happen at this early part of your life. And we'll just carry that thing on and on and on, blaming people, complaining and talking about how bad it is, and almost glorifying and idolizing, what we've gone through or the people that have hurt you or whatever brought you to that place. But it would be better for us and it's more effective for us to take the ownership of our life and to say, it's my responsibility. It might not have been my fault, but it's my responsibility to get some help and to do that. So I think that's really big. Asking for help. Simply asking for help. Like my husband, we work together and we can notice that in each other, discerning when somebody needs help, so asking somebody for help, reach out to a pastor, reach out to the friend, reach out to family, reach out to there's even hotlines out there. We have no excuse. There's help everywhere, so reaching out to the mentor, to a counselor, what have you. There's so much help, asking for help. And then we have to implement and practice what we call a maintenance phase in our process. We have to be able to practice and implement what we have learned from people. Sometimes people tell you things or you get advice or you go to a counselor and then you don't do anything that they're helping you with. And so that's very important. If you're going to make those changes, you actually have to practice. It's not easy, but you have to get up every day and make a conscious effort to practice those things. When you find the way out, run with it.
You know, I just got you. When I sit here and talk, and it's got so many questions. You know, because I'm interested. Like when you talk about help, and I know many people are, just how we can get help, the steps that we take to get help. And I'm encouraged even today. You know, as I talk to you, can you like enlighten like what other success stories? You know, we've talked about um, anxiety. And people are interested, like, hey, is there help for me? I know you can't talk about specifically because of confidentiality, but what kind of success stories have you seen with maybe someone that struggled with anxiety and has gotten better?
Yeah, I like to say the people I work with, the clients that I encounter, they're some of the most bravest, courageous people I've met in life, because they're going through some of the most vulnerable things, and they will come and talk to me, who is a stranger for the first part of that process. By all accounts, I'm a stranger, but they came to me. They were so courageous, and you have to get to a place in your life where you're able to actually reach out to somebody. You've reached the end of yourself when you have to reach out to a stranger. But so I think they're the most courageous and bravest people I've met. And so I think some of the stories I've heard or encountered, people that have come into my office that they were losing their job, or they couldn't even get up and go out to go to their job because they were laid in the bed. They were so anxious and afraid to even go shopping or to go out, into the world, to interact with friends. They were just isolating themselves, and things like that. But to see them today, like some of them, they're out there, socializing, they're meeting new people. You had one of your episodes, I believe it's the second episode, you're talking about the fear of relationship, relationships with Heather Eder. That was so great because you all talked about that. I see people that are now back into relationships. They're confident, and they're confidently going about their life, and then the ultimate is where I've told you that people are actually calling me back and saying, "Hey, Iris, I went back to school. I went and got my degree, and now I'm a therapist. I have a private practice now, or I'm doing my ministry now, or I'm moving up in my job, or what have you, or things are getting better. So those are some of the things that motivate me and why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's just amazing.
When I hear you talk, what I hear is like there's hope, and I'm excited because I feel like I'm like want to preach or somebody say you can still get your boo back. Stella still got a groove. What was that? Stella still get a groove. Still got a groove. Yeah, you can still have your groove. You can still get the job that you want. You can still go to school.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, you're going to tell somebody how you made it over, right?
Yes.
But it does take some steps, And I went into that little preaching message because, as I think about it, the next part is the God factor. A lot of times people won't go to counseling or, even my journey is that you say, and I've heard people say, I don't need none of that. I got God on my side. The Lord is my counselor. And yeah, the scripture says he's a counselor, but it seems to me that he's also put people around us to help us. I'm messing with that, but a lot of us, secretly says that. And God obviously has done so much for us and has helped us along the way, and will continue and work even within the counselor. As we hear that all the time, and I talk about the God factor. However, there are some that say, I need God to help me, but then I need some help. And me and you recently went to Oral Roberts, all our Oral Roberts folks out there, and did an unbelievable conference there. Oral Roberts is doing some. With Stacy doing some wonderful work there in the social work department. And but we talked about blending this clinical and spiritual approach. Can you talk about that? Can we blend it? Can we work it?
Yes, most definitely. A lot of Christians seek me out with insurance companies or throughout the community or what have you. I get referrals all the time, people looking for that approach. the clinical faith-based approach, and so people are definitely interested, and, it is definitely effective. I feel like it accelerates, the work that we do with individuals. And, when I think about this approach, God, is the biggest proponent and advocate of the faith-based clinical approach. I believe when he says, I started the session by talking about be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. He talks about I would that you prosper and be in good health, even as your soul shall prosper. And that's one of the things, another shout out to ORU. They really worked that in us, and we would repeat that mind, body, and spirit, that God was really concerned with that. So he's our premise for this approach, to blending the two. We can't be transformed unless we have the skills and the tools to be renewed in our thinking and our mind. People often will over spiritualize things. Like you said, I believe in prayer. I believe in reading the word and all the spiritual disciplines and things like that. But I also believe that, faith without works is dead, and that we can't over spiritualize these things. We have to actually put the work in. If you're having issues in your life, you also need to start working on these things, and you have to really be specific. And even when you pray, it says don't pray amiss. So God is telling us we have to focus, on these things in order to see changes or what have you. So I definitely believe this is an amazing approach, and people are starting to recognize that, even in our field, in our profession. And we get calls all the time to come with pastors and people calling us to come and work with their congregations, and that's exciting. So
I love doing those moments, when we get the chance to help others. And I'm glad you just talked about that, because God can use, just like he uses a doctor to do physical. Do the physical, right, and help you out medically. It can same way help in terms of counselors and so forth. So we don't want to be afraid of that. But now some of us, though, we talk about ourselves, but some of us got some folk in the house, right, that need some help too. Can somebody say amen out there, wherever you are? Nobody got to hear you say it. Just say it. And we got people around us, and y'all know the folk, and you're like, they crazy, or we talk about them after they leave. But seriously, we have individuals that you're like, hey, they need some help. They have anxiety. They're dealing with depression, and I know all of us have that in our homes, or it might be us. But if we have those individuals, we can't tell a person like, you just go, you need some counseling, and that might not work. Like if people say that, and people be reluctant or they get defensive. Because they know privately that they need help too. Is there a way to help? And is there a way to encourage individuals to get help if they need it?
Yes. Definitely. I think, like Darrin said, we all encounter this all the time, and we ourselves have needed help, and so we need to, again, approach this with empathy. How would we want someone to come to us? Oftentimes we focus on the person's faults and how they affect or impact us. But God wants us to, he says, look beyond the person's faults and see their needs, because someone did that for us at one point. They looked beyond our faults and they saw our needs, and they're still in our life. They're still showing us grace. They're still praying for us and reaching out to us. So I think, just remembering that, and that the humanity of that, just to lead with empathy, to lead with love, to lead with concern, versus trying to fix people, because we're not God. We can't fix people. But if we will lead with that, and maybe show that concern, show that love, show that empathy, also being vulnerable, telling our story, that might, a lot of times people get help because they see how good it has helped you, and if you would say, I got a counselor, or I went to this, or I did this, I picked up the book, I read it, people will be more apt to follow you with that. And, there's a saying that I always like to quote to, my students and people that I'm, talking to about this very type of question. I would say people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Isn't that right?
That's powerful,
people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And so you definitely want to lead with the care and concern, and, giving them some practical tools to get that help. And I think they will.
All right, that's good. I mean, we're all about trying to talk about confronting it. As you talk about help, I mean, to be aggressive, I talk about this where I said, got tired of, being chased by it. It's almost time for me to chase it or to confront it. And I know that sounds a little preachy. Sometimes we talk about chasing the but in reality, some of us have lived with anxiety or depression for a long time. And we're like, what can I do about it? And how can I be aggressive with it? I mean, before I let you go, but as we talk about confronting it, I saw you doing a technique and it just kind of blew my mind because I don't know if you remember one day I pulled up at your office and I saw you in the car. Right. And I saw you in the car and I was like, all right, what are you doing in the car? And you was with an individual and I asked you when you got home, I said, oh, you was in the car today. And obviously you don't tell me anything that happens with your situation. And I talked about this before and I asked you, what is that like, when you're trying to help a person, why were you in that car? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So what you're referring to is I was doing an exposure therapy, or what some clinical therapists know it as in vivo exposure therapy. And it's a process of basically presenting the person with a fear and then desensitizing them to that fear. So they're learning how to face their fears versus running away, because you can run away from something and you can avoid it for so long, and temporarily you might get a benefit from that. You feel like, I feel better. But like you said earlier, that thing is still growing inside of you and it's getting stronger. So what we teach people is the more you run away from it, the bigger it gets, really. But the more you face it, the smaller it gets. It's like, a big old shadow that's, looks so terrifying and fearful. But when you walk up to that thing, you see that it's very small. It's a very small thing, but it's casting a very big shadow, right? And so that's what I was doing that day, is helping that person face their fear so that it could get smaller and they could, and eventually overcome it and be able to drive again or whatever that.
Well, and that did something to me because I immediately begin to think, as we get ready to wrap up the show, is that there's some things that we need to, and we've been afraid a long time to do because maybe there was a negative thing behind it, whether it be a relationship, a job, or whatever it might be in life, and we've run away from it. But it's okay, right? And then also reminds me, and I've said this many times, is that we think like, when we talk about running away, when we go through things, and some of us deal with anxiety, that somehow God is embarrassed by us and that he's running away from us. But really, I believe in those moments of weakness, that he's actually running to us. And not only is God running to us, but God has put like individuals in our life that will run to help us. In the midst, he won't leave you stuck with anxiety. That's not his desire. That's not living, life to max. So there's help all around you as we talk about this. And wow, I'm just excited that we had an opportunity to talk about a subject matter that sometimes people don't want to address. What would you say as we end, if a person is going through something and maybe they're like, even right now as they hear you, they're kind of just anxious and nervous about it. I mean, I know we didn't practice this, but anything else, lasting marks you would like to say?
We talked about a lot, but if you can't remember anything else that we said, that it's okay that you're going through this, and to be okay with being vulnerable, being honest, asking for help. When you forget everything else, that's like a 911. We all remember 911, right? So, remembering that you can ask for help. There's someone out there, there's somebody compassionate in your life that loves you, that cares for you, that's praying for you. We're praying for you. We don't know you, but the reason why, Darrin is doing these podcasts, because we care. And, so if it's even through means of what you heard today, or reaching out, we're always available and willing to help, people. If you need to, you have some comments or you have some things as you see this podcast, reach out, and we'd be happy to help you, lead you in the right direction there. So don't be afraid to ask for help and be honest.
You gonna come back sometime?
Of course.
What an easy conversation. Time to pay the piper. Y'all know what I'm talking about. She promised this is the charge. Yeah.
Well, I'm a person of my words, so I guess I gotta, pay up. So here we go.
Right here. Yeah, all right. Okay. All right. See you guys next time. Utah, check it out on Utah. On YouTube. Maybe you want to follow me there, and we'll be also sharing with you. You'll see other podcasts on there as well, so that you can follow me along the way. God bless you.
God bless you.
Bye bye, Boogieman.